how do you pronounce Tovangar?
This is Los Angeles, not
Oh, sorry, Los Angeles. Sorry, that's what I meant.
Tovangar.
Tovangar?
Mhm.
Got it.
And the Tongva and Gabrielino people of the Los Angeles basin.
Got it.
By the way, guys, I'm going to give very brief introductions to the two of you, but then I'm going to pass the mic so that you guys can also introduce yourselves. Because I hate when you like miss someone's accolades and it's like, you know, in the back of their minds are like, oof, you know, I worked really hard for this one thing and it wasn't mentioned. So I'm going to give you guys.
So I'll kick it off with a land acknowledgement. So we have people on 3 different territories today. So there's going to be 3 different land acknowledgements. So I'll start off with Montreal. So this is curated by the Decolonial Perspectives and Practices Hub. So we want to acknowledge 2 separate legacies and 2 distinct categories of autonomous peoples. The Black and the Indigenous, through our land-specific acknowledgements. In so doing, we grant each category of people its own space to be seen, recognized, and self-empowered, self-determined, in ways that are not comparative, in ways that are not relative to one another, using their very own words and their legacies to ground us into revolutionary allyship and educational advocacy. We'll take 10 seconds of silence after each acknowledgement in a way that expresses and utilizes silence as a modality for activistic acknowledgement and anti-colonial resistance. I will proceed by reading out loud to you the Indigenous land acknowledgements brought to us by the Concordia Indigenous Directions Leadership Group. So we want to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Tjukt'jaage, Montreal is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future, and our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Now let us observe our 10 seconds of silence. Now we move to create a space for Black acknowledgement. For Black Canadians, land acknowledgements are a moment to honor the implications of being disposed of, displaced, and enslaved peoples on stolen lands. To acknowledge our solidarity with the Indigenous peoples of Canada as we frequent and benefit from their lands within our shared histories of genocide, dispossession, and ongoing systemic oppression by settler colonialism. Taken from Natasha Henry, president of the Ontario Black History Association, and Chiomake Mogo from the Canadian Race Relations Association. As Black people in Canada, let's pay homage to the exported Africans, the Black and enslaved who risked their lives for us to be here together and live out there without physical chains. Let us now observe our 10 seconds of silence. So we also have a speaker in Los Angeles, Sandy. So Sandy is in Tovangar, the unceded traditional territories of the Tongva and Gabrielino people of the Los Angeles Basin, now colonized as Los Angeles. And we also have Chris, who is in Toronto. The city of Toronto acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credi, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The city also acknowledges that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 signed with the Mississaugas of the Credi and the William Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. The city of Toronto has been acknowledging the traditional territory since March 2014. Due to conversations with Indigenous leaders, including the Aboriginal Advisory Committee as part of the 2018 Toronto for All campaign, the language the city of Toronto uses has evolved. So now I'd like to pass it off to our moderator for today's event, Maurice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Malcolm. For those of you that are in the audience, welcome to today's conversation with Sandy and Chris. I think it's going to be a fairly interesting one. We're going to have the opportunity to discuss Black History Month, but more so in the context of Canada. I am very, very, very excited to be here today with both Sandy and Chris. Like I said, my name is Maurice Guacamakisa. I'm a Concordia alumni, so big kudos to Concordia and McGill University for putting this on. An Afro-optimist, currently a consultant at Deloitte, global shaper for the World Economic Forum. So when we talk about these social issues that we'll get an opportunity to dive into today, these are things that I think about a lot, and I think we're very much privileged to have the opportunity to have these very different characters come together and discuss this thing that I'm sure we all hold very dearly. So let me start off with Sandy. Sandy is a Jamaican Canadian political activist and writer from Toronto, Ontario. She is the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement presence in Canada. And beyond that, Sandy is also a podcaster that you can find on the Sandy and Nora Talk Politics podcast on Spotify and a variety of other platforms. I've actually been listening to it on my runs over the past few weeks. It's very, very, very insightful. They've recently been talking about everything COVID, everything Ukraine. So I definitely advise you all to go and take a look at that. Next, we have Chris. Chris Boucher is a Canadian St. Lucian professional basketball player who currently plays for the Toronto Raptors. He is also an NBA champion. For those of you that are in Montreal, I'm sure there's a lot of you tuning in. He's also a Montrealer and was raised here for a large part of his adolescence. In addition to that, he is also a podcaster. You can find his podcast on Yahoo Sports on YouTube. So I'm going to give the floor now to Sandy and to Chris so that you guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves as well before we jump into the heart of our conversation. So why don't we start with Sandy?
Thank you so much, Maurice. Yeah, I have nothing to add to the bio. It's like, it's awkward to add to your own bio, but all I have to say is that I am really pleased to join you all today. A lot of my activism work really started as a student at the University of Toronto, learning about how the world works and how I wanted to change the world, and testing and training myself through the campus. And so it's a really special thing for me to be able to join you all today and to have this discussion with students, because I think that students have a lot of power to really get ready to shift this world. And so I'm really excited to see what we generate out of this talk today. Thanks, Maurice.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Well, you said everything too, so I don't know what else to say, but I'm Chris, and I'm just excited to be on, this, this, what is it, Concordia McGill conversation. I think that, it just feels good to be here and just be able to talk about my experience, but also about, just learning from you guys too, because like obviously we all got different paths and we all go through different stuff. So as much as like we all have to stay together, I think it's important to hear how other people get to be successful in this world, but also to give different tricks and different different stories on how we get there and how people treat you. And sometimes it's really important to just have those conversations between us, and especially with students, because obviously they're the future. Obviously, some of us, we're ended to the end. We're already done. We try to do more for the future, but they to keep the future. They are still, working on their path and working on doing something better for this world. So it feels good to be here to talk about it. Hopefully, we can learn a lot from each other on this.
For sure. So let's actually continue with you, Chris. You have a very interesting upbringing. You came from less than privileged background in Montreal. I was listening to one of your interviews, and you didn't even start playing basketball seriously till like 2021, right? So I want you to kind of talk to that, to like a young person, that isn't as privileged, that's growing up in a less privileged neighborhood in Montreal or in a Black community anywhere in Canada. Kind of like, what are the things that helped you succeed and helped you get from where you were at 16 to where you are now, a professional basketball player in the NBA?
I mean, it's tough. There's so much stuff that keep going, that happens, especially when you're like 16 in Montreal. It could be at your house, it could be when you go outside at school. For me, for example, I was not really good at school. I didn't really have a place to stay and all that. So for certain people, I think that off that, you can already start saying, like, what did you have that you could not have? For example, not have a house, or not going to school, not having the money to pay for your supplies or whatever. I think that, the one thing that I've done a lot has been positive. I've been positive my whole life. No matter what happens to me, I always felt like I could find the light out of the end of the tunnel. And I grew up like this, and I feel like, in Montreal, it's easy to just get down on yourself sometimes, just because, we don't have all the resources. We don't have all the, all the help that we could usually do. But for like example, for the students and all that, I feel like at a certain point, you got to have confidence in yourself that you're going to do something and change something in this world. And usually it starts there, just having the courage to go through the hurdles and say that you will do something good for yourself. And that's what I grew up on. That's what I always told myself, no matter what situation I was. And I think it really helped me out, because at the end of the day, if you start listening to a lot of people around you, that not everybody are here to tell you what you want to hear, and not everybody are here to help you. So, it's just to find the places, find the people that are there for you generally, that really care about, what you want to do, and have the same ideas and then take the route. Like I said, it's gonna be ups and downs. That's how I say my life was. It's a roller coaster, but some people take roller coaster to have fun too, to feel like the energy, feel the like the excitement. So to my ups and downs, I usually just make sure that I know when the downs are there, go through it because the ups are coming. When the ups are there, I enjoy it as much as you can because, like I said, it goes ups and downs all the time.
Right. And there's some of the things that you brought up that really resonated was like one being able to see a positive light at the end. Either whether it's coming from inside or whether you have a role model or someone around you that kind of shows you what's possible. And then two, surrounding yourself by people that motivate you and that want you to push you to want to be better. So now moving on to Sandy. Sandy, you have a really interesting parcours simply because, I was listening to something about you and, you were introduced to organizing in a very interesting way. Like there's a story that you're telling online where, you come into this room and, you were informed about this protest that was being organized and it was like 10 people and you couldn't see how this would be possible. And all of a sudden at the protest, there's 5 to 10,000 students. Obviously, this was a very long time ago, and that was your first experience organizing at that scale. To fast forward many years later, and you're, a co-founding member of BLM Canada, and you've organized and brought together thousands of people. That has been tremendously important, especially what we've been through over the past few years through the pandemic as a community. So, can you speak to that experience and kind of co-founding Black Lives Matter Toronto and how the movement has evolved since when you founded it till today? Well, what's that experience been like for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as you say, my first sort of foray into organizing had to do with tuition fees. I was way back. I thought I was going to be a software engineer. I was accepted to the University of Toronto for computer science, and I liked coding. And I didn't realize that the tuition fees like doubled in the second year. And I was already working 3 jobs. I had the most amount of loans that I could get, and my parents couldn't really help me out. We don't come from money. So I was like devastated, and I went to the student union thinking maybe they've got some sort of grant or something, and they were like, "We don't have a grant, but we're organizing a protest. You should come to the protest." And to me, I was like, that does not help me for next year. What am I going to do for next year? But sure, I'll go to your organizing meeting for this protest. And when I went to that organizing meeting, there were only 10 people in the room, and I thought, how are you going to get the province to listen to you to reduce tuition fees with 10 people in a room? You need thousands of people to come to this protest. So I was really skeptical. But I showed up to the protest, and sure enough, thousands of people came. And at that moment, I was like, okay, whatever. I'll drop out of computer science because I can't afford it anyway. But I want to understand how those 10 people got 10,000 people to come to this event, because that is, to me, that's a lot of power. And shortly afterwards, the government announced a tuition fee freeze. So I was like, okay, I'm sold. this stuff works. And so fast forward, I did a lot of student organizing and learning about how to do that sort of thing. When it came to Black Lives Matter, what was happening in 2014 was that Michael Brown was murdered by police officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri. And, that had sent shockwaves around the world. At the same time, just before Michael Brown was murdered, Jermaine Carby was murdered by Officer Ryan Reed in Peel Region. And that was barely on Canadian news. Barely. And this is a situation where this man was shot in his back by police. And the police said he had a knife, but when the SIU, the Special Investigations Unit, the watchdog body for Ontario, when they showed up, there was no knife. And then the police went and got a knife that just so happened to be the kind of knife that doesn't have, that has a handle that can't pick up fingerprints. It was a very weird situation. It was a kitchen knife that didn't match any of the knives in his kitchen. It was all a very strange situation. Why wasn't that on the news? I was really distressed by that. A lot of people who I knew were really distressed by that. And that year, American activists called upon people around the world to have solidarity rallies. And I was like looking to see, I was like, who's doing this? Like, I want to go to the Solidarity rally. And there was a conversation I was having with my younger brother over the phone when we realized, no one's doing a Solidarity rally. There's nothing, we're not going to be able to go somewhere to like express our frustration. And he said, well, I just want you to know that I'm upset about this, but I'm also kind of annoyed with you. And I was like, why? He goes, you've been doing all of this stuff for tuition fees all of these years. Like, you know how to do a rally. Why wouldn't you just do it if nobody else is doing it? And I was like, well, I'm not an expert. Like, I'm not sure. And he was like, these are excuses. It just sounds like excuses to me. So I'm just letting you know that I'm a little frustrated at you too. My baby brother is 7 years younger than me. I was like, that really felt like an important challenge.
Yeah.
And I realized he was right. I was, if you have the ability to do something, I think we should all do what we can when we are brought up against injustice. So I called everyone that I knew, and we didn't have a lot of time. We had like less than 5 days, and we got together. We made signs. We created a Facebook event, and it went viral, and people started picking it up in Edmonton and Vancouver and Montreal and Ottawa, and using the materials that we created to hold their own rallies. I'd been doing rallies for, 10 years at that point, and I knew that we only had the amount of time and put in the amount of effort for maybe 100 people to show up. 3,000 people showed up, which told us that people were doing what I was doing, waiting and trying to find, like, where is this rally happening? Where is it going to be? Yeah. And so at that moment, we realized that people were really wanting a mobilization force in Canada to bring light to these issues. And we thought that it would be irresponsible to stop with just one event. And so that's how we started BLM Toronto.
Wow. That's a very inspiring story. I mean, like, the thing that really stands out to me there is just like how so few people can make such a big impact and such a big difference. So like for those that are listening, like if you ever doubt yourself and think that you're too few to do something, like you're definitely far from that, judging off of Sandy's experience. Now for both of you, we're obviously here to talk in the context of Black History Month, although it is March, but more Black history never hurt anyone. I'm gonna start with you, Sandy. What does Black History Month mean to you?
Well, I mean, there are so many different ways to answer that question. Speaking to a Canadian audience, I think one of the things I'll say is that Canada's brand of anti-Blackness is its refusal to look at Black people, its refusal to acknowledge the sins of the past. There's so many things that people would be surprised to know because in Canada, we simply just don't learn about this history. Things like the last segregated school in Canada closed in the 1980s. 1980s. That's like after Brown v. Board of Education in the United States that ended segregation was in the 60s, and a lot of the ending of segregation schools happened in the 70s. The last segregated school in Canada closed on the East Coast in Nova Scotia in the 1980s. A lot of people don't know, think about Canada as the end of the Underground Railroad, the promised land, the land of hope and dreams. But a lot of people don't know that there was a reverse Underground Railroad of people trying to escape draconian measures and laws and the way that enslaved people were treated in Canada from people were escaping Canada to go to the northern United States where the laws were more favorable to Black people. These histories, we should know these things. We should know these things. And so for me, Black History Month is a time where I really see it as a time when I get to work and trying to undo some of that refusal to look that Canada is engaged in. And I also really want to celebrate as much as we can, feel up on ourselves, feel good about the way that we are creating the future Black people, because I think that so much culture of the world is born of Black people. Us struggling, us creating, us being creatives and living life. in the ways that we can. So those are a couple of ways to answer a very, very big question, Maurice.
And now going on to Chris, like I want to ask you the same question about what Black History Month means to you, but more so from the lenses of you were born in St. Lucia, if I'm getting that correctly. You came into Canada at a very young age, and for a lot of Black Canadians, that's our story. I was reading this thing on Stats Can before getting on this call. Like 52% of Black Canadians were born in Canada, right? So it's quite remarkable. But given that immigrant background, a lot of people coming from other Black communities outside of North America don't necessarily have, that knowledge, that understanding of Black History Month, right? So from you coming from St. Lucia and your experience growing up in Montreal, what did Black History Month mean to you as a young kid?
I mean, for me, it was different just because, I feel like I've learned so much on the fly. I didn't really learn much from school, really. It's not like they put an emphasis on, the black society and what we're going through and the equality and all that. So, more for my lifestyle and, my friends and the stuff that I was dealing with, when I sit here now and, it's Black History Month, I realize all the stuff that I've been through and how it's important to recognize, this, how Black people are trying to be successful in the stuff that they're doing and how important it is for them to celebrate what they accomplished, because at the end of the day, it sucks that we're going to get a month. I think that we should be able to be doing that every time. But, we have a specific month where it's like Black history, but like you can learn so much from people's story. And it's sucks that it's all in 1 month where you're not, oh, it's Black History Month. No, let me learn about the Black history and all that. And I feel like that's something that should be in your brain from when you start to go to school and all the way till you finish, So, I'm just happy to, when Black History Month, I'm just happy to be able to talk about it. Obviously, and the NBA too does a really good job to, show and talk about it. But I feel like at the end of the day, it doesn't explain exactly what we've been going through to get to where we are, and the process and like the failures and the accomplishments are not all out there. And that's one thing that I try to do most of the time is I talk about it all the time as soon as I have the chance. And it's just because I feel like at the end of the day, I did something, but like it's not special. Like, yeah, okay, I play basketball, and some people do a lot more stuff, a lot harder, just to be able to bring food to their table, right? And it's just it's not easy, obviously, but like there's a lot of things to be happy about, especially to be a black person in this world. It means a lot, and especially when you find ways to change the world and make people better and like be a blessing and be other people's life. The union between the Black people. I just think that those are all things that unfortunately is not speaking about as much, but it's really important. And like Sandy said, it's important to celebrate it. It's important to realize and be happy about being a Black person in this country. Even though I had a situation where when the whole Black Lives Matter happened, and Draymond Green was talking on the side. He was like, well, since you're in Canada, we don't talk much, it doesn't happen over there. But a Black man in this world, I don't care where you are, Canada, USA, Africa, you still go through the Black situations, Black issues. You're still going to go through equality, and this is everywhere, and it happens everywhere. And unfortunately, people think that, because you're in Canada, it doesn't happen there, but it happens everywhere. So that's the one thing that it needs to be bringing to light, is that everybody go through a situation.
For sure. And actually to build on that, like this is you brought up something that's a great segue into my next question, which is organizing and activism around the Black community in specifically the NBA, right? So I think even just visually, now when you watch the league during Black History Month, everyone's wearing the T-shirts. They're the Black Lives Matter T-shirts. There's there's the knee, and there's been this evolution of sports that you could argue that a lot of it started in the NFL, but there's a lot of work being done in the NBA as well. So you being a player in the league, how has activism from your perspective evolved in the NBA since you got in the league? And what are conversations around activism like, actually? And you guys...
I mean, it really got better through the years just because people felt like, at first people didn't want to really talk about it. They felt like it was going to affect their career or it was going to affect their image or Obviously they feel like they're working for a certain organization that probably don't want them to speak about it that much. And it's like when you're in the NFL, taking a knee, you might lose your job, so people don't want to do it, even though they feel like that's the right thing to do. So it got better with the league just because I feel like a lot of people just decided to stand up for it. And after the George Floyd, that really helped a lot of people too, because they were like, okay, well, if we don't do it, who's gonna do it? And eventually, like Sandy said for her story, 10 people and she got 1,000. And those people probably don't have the same platform that we have. We on TV almost every day, and also I think when people start going on TV and start talking about it and say exactly how they feel about the situation, it makes it a lot easier for other people to follow it, because they're like, well, if he did it, I could do it too. And it starts from one, and then it keeps going, and hopefully it keeps going all around to every sport, because like I said, you open your TV and what you see sports. So you should be, I feel like, the same way we talk about sport, we should be talking about the issue that happened in this world.
Right, 100%. And I feel like I'm asking Chris, I'm asking you about activism in the league. I feel it's only fair that I ask Sandy, like, how good is your jump shot? Is that?
It's bad, man. Okay, look, I have never been good at any sport where you have to manipulate an instrument, a ball, a stick, any of those things. Very Jamaican, am into track and field, okay? Track and field is my thing. That's what I do.
Jokes aside, though, Sandy, what are some specific challenges that you feel that Black activists have to deal with that other activists of other communities don't necessarily have to confront? It's loaded.
That's a very loaded question. I'm going to be very honest. When we started, we got contacted by a number of elders in the Black community in Toronto who were active in the Black Women's Collective, the Black Action Defense Committees, these activist groups that were really active in the 80s and 90s. And they said to us, one of the very first things they said to us was, make sure that all of the stuff around your money is on point, because what they always come at Black activists with is money, either personally or through the organization. I think we're seeing that now with some of the responses to and critiques to Black Lives Matter in the United States in particular. But that was what they said right away. And I actually I have not seen that with other movements. I've never seen anyone be like, the climate movement, where's the money that they've generated over the years? I've never seen anyone do that to movements around gun control. I haven't seen it with other movements at all. It is one of the ways that anti-Blackness just operates generally, is that people think that we are not good with money, that we are the insinuation is that we are thieves. And I mean, again, we are seeing that right now, and that is something that other movements just don't have to deal with. And looking even, I don't know much about what's happening in the United States with respect to that, but just looking objectively, you have a movement that takes in millions and millions of dollars over 1 year in 2020, where they didn't have that much before. And before 2021 is over, you're like, where did the money go? It's like, give them time to set up before you start calling them, saying that things are messy. Like I said, with activists, our biggest issue across all activism, I'd say, is a lack of resources, right? We don't have, we're not corporations, we're not businesses, we're not politicians. We don't have a staff of 50 people to make sure that everything works. We're working on shoestring budgets and with a lack of resources at all times. And so when you're saying you want people to figure out how to become a giant corporation in less than a year, and you would not expect that from any other movement, right. It just seems to be Black folks. And when I was looking at, I have read a lot of this history, looking at the history of BADC, the Black Women's Collective movements in Canada, and also movements in the United States, this is consistent. This is what happens every single time, especially after a moment of uprising. There comes a backlash, and along with that backlash, this idea that aren't those people all thieves? And I don't see that with any other movement. And it's a really ugly thing that I think that people need to come to recognize. There's nothing wrong with asking for accountability, but I think that when you're asking for accountability, you need to be careful about acknowledging what's real and what is, a part of some sort of coordinated backlash that is made to make you think that Black movements are not worth supporting.
Right. No, I think, one of the things that you brought up, which I want us to segue into, because I think it's one of the most interesting things about the Black community, one of the things I'm most passionate about, and that's inter-community politics, right? So you brought up, you guys, you're now the young activists, you're the ones that have the energy to go out and to organize, and you have all these elders in the community that are giving you guys advice. One of the things I mentioned earlier was the fact that like 52% of Black Canadians are not born in Canada, right? There's a diversity in the Black community in Canada that makes the Black community in Canada very different and distinct from that in the States, right? So you have people from the islands, you have people from the African continent, you have people that have been in Canada for generations. And one of the things I'm really curious about is that how does that affect your perceptions of the Canadian Black community? And Sandy, when we get to you, how do those challenges, we come here, a Nigerian is a Nigerian, a Jamaican is Jamaican, a Haitian is a Haitian, and then now we're all put together and we're all Black, now we have to organize ourselves with these preconceived identities. So how does that impact activism in a way that, like, what challenges come from that within the community that we don't see in organizing in the States? And I'm going to let you simmer on that one because it's also a loaded question. And I'm going to go to Chris and specifically talking about, this diversity in Canada and your experience with the Black community. You grew up in Quebec, whenever I'm in Toronto, it's like a completely different experience with the Black community. Finding a Haitian restaurant is hell in Toronto. Versus in Montreal, I'm like eating banane pisé whenever I get a chance, right? So for you growing up in a predominantly Francophone community in Canada and seeing diversity here versus in Ontario, what's that been like for you and how do you perceive the Black community as a result?
Well, funny story, I've always been, people thought I was Asian my whole life. I grew up in Montreal North, Montreal North, so I was around Asian my whole life, and then I moved to the West, uptown, and then they thought I was Jamaican just because, it's uptown. And so I've seen, the difference, but we all got treated the same way. At the end of the day, I never felt like, when I was arrested for, let's say, going walking and they thought that I was somebody else, I never felt like they were like, oh, he's Jamaican, I'm gonna let him go. Or he's Asian, I'm gonna let him go. He was like, he's Black, period. And that was the end of the story. So, obviously between us, like a lot of, we want to be recognized for where we come from. Obviously, if I'm Asian, I'm Asian. I'm not Jamaican. If I'm Jamaican, I want to be called Jamaican. But at the end of the day, I think that for me, it never changed the way I was seeing the other person in front of me. It never changed what I was, his story or what he's going through. I felt like at the end of the day, by his skin, I could tell what he's going through, and that he probably got the same hurdles as me, probably going through the same injustice as me. And there's a lot of stuff that I had to learn where it's like, they say that sometimes you want to be quiet, but you just can't. And a lot of situations happened to me where I've saw other people go through situations and I wanted to say something and I didn't because I felt like my voice didn't mean nothing, or because of my skin, what can I do for that person? And it happened like that for a long time until I realized that saying nothing is worse than saying something. And at the end of the day, I've seen people get arrested and wanted to say something. And if I would have said something, it would have made two of us instead of one of us. And now he's by himself. So, Asian, Black, Jamaican, whatever you are, I feel like, you're still going to go through the same issues, but it's important to stay together. That's the one thing I keep saying to everybody is that we can't do it by ourselves. We are strong people. We're Black people are strong. by themselves, but they're stronger together. And that's one thing that I kind of want to push all the time, because like I'm like that. I feel like, okay, I could do it all by myself. You know, I could say, I could talk, I could stand up for myself, but certain battles are better to be fought with more people than one person. And that's the most important thing, is that no matter what you know, nationality that you come from, don't forget the skin that you are, which is black, and fight for your people, because we need all of us together, to be honest with you.
100%. And Sandy, for you, that this diversity that we have in the Black community here in Canada, how does that create challenges or opportunities in when it comes to organizing the Black community here that, you know, is very different from the challenges and opportunities that exist in the States, for example?
I actually think it's one of our strengths here, and it has never felt difficult. It's always been something that we are willing to be very honest about looking at, the diversity of who we are working with. And that looks like making sure that we have representation from people who've been in Canada for a very, very long time, for generations, people from the Caribbean, people from the continent. It also looks like making sure that we have representation for people who are experiencing Blackness through a disabled body, people who are experiencing Blackness as queer folks, people who are trans and experiencing Blackness in that way. So we even have conversations about, like, very honest conversations about, like, let's take a look at our team right now. Do we have like a light skin bias right now? Or do we have representation from folks who are darker and experiencing colorism in addition to the anti-Black racism that we experience? And so I think a willingness to, like, just look and honestly assess and say, if we're missing something here, we want to bring those people into the team and make sure that we are having a representative group of people who are working together. I really mean, like, it was, you know, youth, parents, like, we're really always thinking about who are we working with and who can we bring in the fold. In the United States, I actually think it's a big challenge for them, because I've seen some conversations where you know, people are arguing about, well, it wasn't as bad in the Caribbean. This is different here, and I mean, they also have a unwillingness to look outside of America. In America is a very insular place. So that, you know, in Canada, you kind of have to know about the whole world in a way, living in Canada. In America, you don't need to know about anything beyond the shores of America. So there are a lot of misconceptions about Black people outside of America in America. And America has a very diverse Black community as well. And it makes it, I think, that kind of cultural inability to look outside of America makes it a little bit more difficult here, because I'm located in Los Angeles. It makes it a little bit more difficult here, some of those conversations. And I hope they get to a point to where, you know, we are at with our organizing in Canada, where this sort of thing is really looked at as a strength.
For sure. By the way, for those that are listening to us, like, once again, Chris and Sandy are incredible. So please take advantage of the moment to send in questions in our chat box. I'm going to go ahead and read one from the audience, and you guys can both give like a book or something that you'd like to recommend to the audience. But the question is, for someone who is interested in learning more, where do you recommend to look for the history of Black people in Canada, such as books, documentaries, etc.? I feel like every time you look for Black history, it's often about the US. So either one of you, just go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I was like, when I saw the question come in, I was like looking at my bookshelf like behind me. So I have a bunch, and maybe I'll write some of them down in the answer box as well, so you can take you can see. But I will say that if you search for the Black Canadian syllabus on Google, someone a few years ago created like a list of different resources. So that's one you can take a look at. There's a great book called Fear of a Black Nation that is written by David Austin, who's a professor in Montreal, I believe. There's a book called The Hanging of Angelique about, the hanging of Angelique and the burning of Montreal. It was written by Dr. Philip Cooper. There's Policing Black Lives by Robin Maynard. Until We Are Free by myself, Rodney, and Cyrus Marcus Ware. There's a lot of different books. So I'll put those in the chat box. And then also CBC has started a series called Being Black in Canada. And there's a few documentaries about Black people on the prairies, for example, documentary shorts that you can find on CBC's website. So check out CBC's Being Black in Canada.
And then for you, Chris, is there any like story, documentary book that you read, you watched that marked you that you like to recommend to the audience?
Well, I mean, there's one book that I read. I mean, it's really how you understand it. I feel like it made me understand a lot of different stuff. Obviously, most of the stuff that I've seen was on life experience with that, but it's the skin we're in, and it's by Desmond. That's one of the best books I've read. It's just because I kind of wanted to understand. Obviously, I'm a Black person. I kind of went through a lot of stuff, and I've seen it, but I never really understood it from other people's perspective, because I've always said like I'm going through it. So
Right.
what is so different from what you're saying? But like sometimes it's just the story that you hear, the way that he explained how comfortable that he was with himself, and how he felt with somebody else not be comfortable but being the same in a better position.
Yeah.
It made me really understand that in the Black community, a lot of people are really comfortable with who they are, and it makes it a lot easier for them to keep going forward and change and learn from other people. And some people are so uncomfortable that they don't want to hear anything about other people, and that's what it did to me. So if there's that's one of the books that I'd say to read and ask questions. We all got friends that are really going through it, that are going through injustice, and that are living in poverty, that they don't have the supplies to do anything. And usually you can ask them, especially if you're close to them, and they'll tell you from the heart. And you can learn a lot more from people that are going through trouble like right now, that are really, they're still trying to find response, and they're just trying to find a solution. And then you can learn from them too, because at the end of the day, like I said, they're going through it. You can learn a lot of stuff at school, but life experience also teach you a lot of stuff. And some people have really bad life experience that they can tell you that and show you really the inside of it that you can't really get out of anything else.
Absolutely. It's funny that you bring that up, because I always get like stopped by old Caribbean ladies on the bus in Montreal, and they always have like stories for me, and it ends up with a blessing or something. So you're
That,
absolutely right. Another question from the audience is, any advice on how to find a group yourself with the right individuals from your community who want to grow and create change? I think that main thing is kind of about like, how do you find people with similar interests in our community to actually drive change? Kind of like you, Sandy, with the 10 people, or you, Chris, the people that, I mean, you're in the gym with talented people every day. So how do you find those people that can motivate you?
I'm really an observant person, so I observe a lot. Before you get any answer from me, before you even hear my voice, I'll probably stay in a room and observe and listen to what you're saying, and just so I could get enough information to have a conversation with you, and also if I want to have a conversation with you, because a lot of conversation don't need to be happening, and you just allow it, but really they don't know what they're talking about. So for me, it's more like I said, you can sit in a room and see who really is taking the situation by heart, and who really make their research, who's really into it, and the people that are just following just because they think it's the cool thing. So for me, that's one thing I would say, is to pay attention to how they talking, what they say, if it's consistent. Because some people today, it's Black Lives Matter, and tomorrow it's like, I don't care, my life is good, right? So those are the people that you gotta look into, and usually the people that are really fighting for the right reason and are really deep into it, those conversation comes back every day, and this conversation never changed. Their point are always the same, and those are the people that you gotta be around, because they're not gonna change up on you. Tomorrow they will take the same thing they were thinking today, and those are the best people to be around.
Absolutely. Sani, I'm going to ask you a separate question so that we can get through as many as possible. So, my daughter is 12 years old and is very interested in knowing our history. And I often I am oftentimes stuck on how to address these questions. Do you have any suggestions for a growing teenager? Also, books would be helpful. We've been watching a doc series called Hidden Colors, which is nice, but I need more. Thank you in advance. So for a young teenager, preteen, 12-year-old, what do you recommend, Sandy?
So I put right afterwards of that in the chat what I think is a good response, which is the CBC's Being Black in Canada series. So you'll find there some current news events, but there's also the Being Black in Canada broadcast, which is like there's two documentaries that CBC has done called Being Black in Canada. And then there's suggestions for a whole bunch of books, some that are fiction but based in history, so historical fiction, some that are nonfiction. And it features all sorts of different things. So I really think that you should take a look at that. There's a lot of people who have been contributing that CBC has put forward and elevated through this platform. So I really encourage you to check that out.
Awesome, thanks. The next question is, I think it's a really great question. So first off, they start, thank you all so much for sharing with us today. As a Caucasian grandmother of a 7-year-old little boy with a Kenyan father, what age, a young Obama, I'll just put a little wink there, but with a Kenyan father, what age appropriate resources might you have to offer, and what help that are helpful in discussing important issues with him as he grows up? My daughter does a great job, but we can always use extra resources. So either Chris, Sandy, just jump ahead. We can always refer to the same resources. Hey, I think Sandy did a great job earlier. That aside, guys, we still have a little bit more time. Do you guys have questions for each other? Actually, I feel like you guys, I'm assuming you guys didn't know each other before, you know? So as someone that's like a big organizer in the community, and Chris is someone that has the cameras on him all the time in a game and whatnot, like what do you guys have to say to each other?
No, but I didn't even know it was like the co-founder, so it feels good to learn that. Like obviously, you're in LA right now.
Yep, in LA.
So when you was in Toronto, right? What's the main thing that you would say that when you went to LA that you felt like changed completely? Because obviously, I've been to the US a lot, and I feel like you said, like it's US, 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 and most issues like, okay, well, we're going through this, and it's worse here than it is anywhere else. So why you guys complain, basically, right? So how do you feel about this situation now that you're in LA and you've been doing stuff in Toronto?
Yeah, it's really frustrating, the kind of misconceptions that people have about Canada sometimes, because I feel like I'm constantly having to educate people about what Canada is really like. It's very bizarre. Like, I mean, here's a statistic that kind of blew my mind that I didn't realize. In Toronto, this I knew, okay? In Toronto, Black people are 20 times more likely to be shot and killed by police than white folks, okay? In Los Angeles, Black people are 6 times more likely to be shot and killed by police than white folks. I mean, when people hear me say that in the United States, they think that I'm lying. Like they're like, that's not possible. And I'm just like, you have to understand this imaginary line that we call a border. It's not that strong. Okay, it doesn't shift the society massively, and to have to really, I feel like I'm constantly explaining that to people who. I've had an activist say to me, like, I don't even know why you would be doing anti-Black racism activism in Canada. You should just be trying to help all of us Black people get to Canada. Mm-hmm. I was like,
yes. I've heard some.
Yeah, it's frustrating, because it just feels like, to me, what that tells me is that what we used to have in the past, in like the 60s and 70s, this sort of Pan-African movement where people from the United States, the Caribbean, the continent, and all over the place were always working together. So they kind of understood that their situations were perhaps specific and local, but there was some shared experience of anti-Blackness. I think we've lost a lot of that in contemporary times, because for people who are doing activism work, who are, academics, people who are engaged in studying this stuff, to say that to me, I'm like, yeah, this means that we're missing a lot of connection over the world. So I go back to what you said, Chris, about how unity is so important. And I guess my question for you would be, do you find it a challenge being in the public eye and wanting to do advocacy work, like wanting to make some changes? Like, is that a major challenge for you, and how do you address that?
I mean, I think the hardest thing about it is you can't really always say what you want. Like at the end of the day, I have a job, and you kind of have to stay in the box of what you gotta say, because if you go outside, then it causes you an issue. But sometimes you want to say exactly what you want to say and get to the point. And you can go around, but the point is never made until you say it. And that's the reason why I did my podcast, because I felt like in my podcast I could actually be who I am. And since I'm the one that doing the edit and all, I could actually stand up on what I say and not be concerned of somebody telling me I can't say something. And especially when it comes to black issues and all that. I play with 450 people, right? And maybe like 80% of them are black, right? And when they learn I'm from Canada, it's like, oh, you don't know that. It's not happening over there. Or, like it's always the same thing. Like a crazy person, I don't care where you are. If you're crazy, you're crazy. So Canada, US, it doesn't really matter. And a lot of people don't realize that racism happens everywhere. And we all go through it. And that's the one thing that is challenging, is to make them understand that I don't have to be coming from the US to understand what you're going through or what you've been through or how did you get there, because I probably did the same thing. And sometimes it's even harder for us, the fact that we're in Canada, we're not really the concern of anybody. Nobody talks about it. Like I said, you don't even know there's racism in Canada. So how you think we feel when we're over there in Canada and nobody talks about it? You know what I'm saying? At least I'm not saying it's good, but in the US, we know it's happening and it's talking a lot more. But in Canada, you think it's not happening, so everybody that's dealing with it, they don't really have that same pool as you. And that's the one thing I felt like I had to do, is because I know I'm Canadian, I've been through it. And every time that I hear something about, oh, it's not happening in Canada and all that, I feel like I have to bring it up, because I have friends that are still in Montreal going through it. I got lucky, I got out of it, and I live a better life, but I'm still going through the same situation when I talk to my other friends, because they feel like, oh, I'm from Canada, it's not happening. Well, I got friends in Canada going through it now. So that's the challenging part. And just wanting to say exactly how you feel is another challenge. So obviously, I use my platform as much as I can, and I try to stay in between the boundaries, because like I said, I do want people to know that, we know what's going on and we want to make a change. And I also feel like at the end of the day, if I could change, like if I could make this 4 years old understand this at 4 instead of me wait till he finished school and now he's 25, 24, learning this now, I feel like I didn't do my job. So, I try to do it as quick as I want, as fast as I can. And like I said, a lot of kids are watching me, which is one thing that I like, is because I could send my voice to those kids, and they could, take the voice, go to school and talk about it. If it's like I heard Chris Boucher say that, and that's what I think now, and good, because like I said, I wish when I was a young kid like that, I had somebody that told me you know what, racism is like this in US, in Canada, it doesn't change, because the way I had to live through it to understand it, and I don't want other kids to go through all those injustice and all that to realize that it's like that everywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, listen, I should have put this conversation on autopilot a little bit earlier. You guys are both great speakers, and it's lovely hearing from both of you. There's one more question, but I first want to ask your time, your schedules. We're supposed to be ending relatively soon, so if you go a little bit over, how do you guys both feel about that?
Good.
Awesome. Sure. So this last question, very, very good. A very broad question, and coming from a South Asian non-Canadian, we often talk about how a goal should be cross-community solidarity and organizing across racialized groups within Canada and across the world. But there's a lot of issues and representation issues within and across each of these communities: casteism, colorism, seeking validation through model minority myths in South Asian communities, for example. So how much focus can we put on external community building when each community has their own sets of issues and complexities? How do we build solidarity with one another without harming one another in the process? Or maybe a better question would be, how do we move through that question while doing movement building? So the end kind of tapered off, but how do we build solidarity within one another across communities without harming one another in the process?
I would say definitely ask questions before. There's a lot of stuff that like when you go into conversation and you just don't know what you're talking about. That's when you can hurt yourself. That's when you can hurt the people around you. For example, at first, I won't lie to you, I didn't know much. Like life experience and all that, I knew, okay, this is what's going on, but not deep enough to be talking and saying what's better for people and all. And especially when you like when you come from let's say I'm a black person and you're Asian, whatever. If you come talking to me and you say something that is not what I want to hear, or I feel like you don't know what you're talking about, it's hard for me to be like, you know what, I want to talk about it. So I think that if you actually make your research and know exactly where you want to get to, it's a lot easier for a person like me or any activist that actually is strongly believe in doing something right for the black people. You gotta actually make your research, because at the end of the day, we don't want fake followers, for example. We don't want people that actually just want to say something because it's the cool thing to say, right? So that's the best thing to do, I'd say. Read books, for sure. I think that's one thing that I've learned that I didn't like school. I didn't like books. I didn't like nothing of it. But I didn't realize the knowledge that are in that you could take in for your life and put in other people's perspective. Because some people are not. They don't have time to read books. Like if I were to live a 9 to 5, I don't know if I want to read a book. Like I know I'm gonna work every day. I know I have this to do. I'm not gonna want to get this knowledge, and I'm just gonna go through it every time. But like for the people that are around that are making, like for example, Sandy, she probably got so much knowledge that you just need to be around her to get some of it. You know what I'm saying? And that's how you start. That's how you start, really. To be honest with you.
Yeah. Sandy, what about you?
I think that this kind of idea that you can only do one thing at a time is false. Like you can support different you can care about climate crisis and also care about racism. You can do that in your own body. You can do that as someone who's doing organizing. You could play basketball and have a podcast. You can be at school studying and organize these sorts of events. We can do multiple things. And I think the idea that that we're constantly in competition with one another, I don't accept that. Like, when we did one of the actions that we did in Toronto was we did a tent city in front of the police station for 2 weeks. And when we were doing that, there was a group of people that came that had signs that said 6 for Black Lives. There was a group of people that came that were like Chinese solidarity for Black lives. Like it was just a whole bunch of different communities came. If you see something that's happening, you can always go and support. That doesn't mean you stop what you're doing. And we do the same thing, especially with respect to, I remember in 2016 when a lot of things were happening in the Indigenous community in Attawapiskat, we did a lot to try to help and support. You can do multiple things. The question of how we do things without harming each other, I think we also got to know that as soon as you're in relationship with other people, you're going to have disagreements sometimes because that's how we are as humans. None of us are the same. And disagreements can be a really beautiful thing. If you're disagreeing with someone, it might be because they know more than you, or maybe you know more than them, or maybe there's a perspective that you've never thought of before. And if you look at those things as opportunities to learn from one another, that is a good way to enter a disagreement instead of like, I got to defend my position. Being open to hearing what the other person is saying. And then also just acknowledge that you might hurt somebody. I mean, throughout our lives, there ain't no perfect human who doesn't hurt people. And dealing with some of these issues, racism is hard. We're going to have disagreements. People feel very deeply about it. And we might hurt each other. We might become angry with one another. I think that the important thing is to be oriented to resolving those issues. Be like, Chris, Maurice, you people are too important to me as Black people. I think there's too few of us. We gotta keep all of us in the movement and making sure that we're all fighting for what we can and coming together where we can. So even though, Maurice, I disagree with you on this thing, I am gonna, work through it with you and try to make it right. And I think that that's how we need to move through conflict in this world, whether in the movement or with your family. Like we have to be committed to continuing to work with one another and working through problems.
Absolutely. Thank you both for those incredible questions and just for your time today. Just like for my little take on that question, and even just to quickly sum up what we've discussed here today, like when we talk about community and we talk about diversity, even within the Black community, like Sandy has a Jamaican background, Chris has a St. Lucian background. I'm from Cameroon, I've been here for much shorter than they have. They've been here for much longer. But in the context of the South Asian question, like I grew up across 14 different countries on the African continent and the Caribbean. And I can tell you that in East Africa, there's a huge Southeast Asian community there. Like the largest population of Indians outside of India are in South Africa, for example, and there's a lot of them in Kenya as well. So like to the point where in Kenya, some would consider chapati as a national dish, chapati and samosas as a national dish today. So our communities, whether it's within the Black community or others, we've always been linked, and not only in the West or North America, but across the world. So these conversations go beyond just our sometimes narrow-minded perception of what our communities are. And if we open our eyes a little bit, it oftentimes goes well beyond that. Otherwise, Chris, Sandy, thank you both so much for your time today. We really do appreciate it. Thank you to our organizers, Concordia University and McGill University and their respective student unions. Chris, Sandy, do you guys have any last things to say? Any plugs for initiatives that you're currently working on that you'd like our audience to know about?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me. Obviously, it's always good to come here and, talk about, the situation that happens in life, and just the importance of recognizing how important it is to talk about those issues, and knowing that Black History Month is more than just 1 month where we gotta talk about it. This should be a conversation that's been happening every day, and hopefully this can keep going, because I see Black is beautiful and Black is proud.
Awesome. Sandy?
Yeah, no plugs, just a real deep gratitude to all of you for being here with us, and gratitude to Chris and Maurice for this really beautiful conversation. And hopefully we can do something like this again. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Looking forward to connecting after, and I'll pass it on to Malcolm.
Yeah, I just had this last little thing I wanted to add for you guys. So we actually got a local a student artist actually to make something for this event. I'm just going to bring on one of the people who helped organize this. Yeah, it'll be to give out to students, but also we were hoping to be able to send it over to our speakers today. Sean, I'll pass it off to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Malcolm. And thanks to Maurice, Sandy, and Chris. This was a fantastic fireside chat. I was very captivated by everything. So thanks to the three of you. And so we worked really hard on this. And the artist who created it is Gardenia Duverger. Hopefully I said that correctly. And this is the pin that she created. Here, let me try to get in the focus. It will be hard. Can you see it?
Yes.
So what it is a fist and a comb. And the three of you are going to be getting one. We're going to send it to you. So hopefully afterwards you can coordinate where to send it. But we wanted to send it to, Chris and Sandy, and then Maurice as well for, hosting and collaborating the two great minds in the room.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.